Morning, it's August 20th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Well, the agency that Senator Elizabeth Warren wanted and created, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is reeling from the budget cuts being made by the current administration. And this was an agency that was not needed, but somehow Democrats thought getting more government workers to go after legitimate businesses was a good thing. Before Ms. Warren even became a senator, she persuaded Congress and then President Barack Obama to create this strange creature called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in the 2010 Dodd-Frank law. The Bureau would duplicate, replace, or expand on the efforts of existing financial regulators, but with a few dangerous twists. It would have no mandate to protect the safety and soundness of the financial institutions it regulates, and it would not rely on Congress for funding. Instead, the Bureau would have the ability to draw funding from the Federal Reserve, ensuring that it wouldn't have to pay attention to congressional appropriators. Well, they're now getting over $700 million a year, and since the Fed did not have that amount of money, they did what government always does. They simply printed more money to meet the needs of this agency. But there is no real accountability. This lack of accountability has facilitated a series of statutorily dubious regulatory actions through which the CFPB technocrats seek to unilaterally micromanage American businesses. The New York Times, a liberal media outlet, aptly summed up this dynamic, writing that, quote, CFPB Director Rohit Chopra insists that he always follows the rules, but his view is that he's simply more expansive than others in determining what those rules are, end quote. Wow, you get to just decide what rules you want. Defenders of this agency's expansive power believe that should the agency sometimes color outside the lines of its statutory authorities, all the better. It will nonetheless enact progressive financial regulation, including many policies that Congress would likely never approve. A 2023 agency policy statement ruled that regulators may establish abusive conduct by a company without showing any substantial injury. Essentially, this language frees this agency to pursue cases arbitrarily, untethering enforcement actions from provable consumer harm. And according to the agency, business practices that could draw regulatory scrutiny as abusive include incredibly broad and typically standard practices such as multi-step online click-throughs, delayed customer support, fine print and complex language-informed contracts. And they go after them anytime they can. Well, this is all about to come to an end. The employees at this agency have been working remotely, and one was found to be working mostly from Mexico. He had been in several other countries as well. The Trump administration was never a fan of the agency and sought to close it down. They closed the building and forced all the workers to work from home again, but they went to court when he tried to fire them. And they found a favorable federal district judge, and he issued an injunction preventing the administration from terminating the employees at the CFPB. But last Friday, things changed. The government unions had another bad day Friday when a federal court let the Trump administration resume whittling down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The ruling upheld a key plank of executive power by barring plaintiffs from challenging reforms before they've taken shape. A panel of D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals voted 2-1 to lift the lower court injunction that had halted restructuring at the CFPB. The agency in February began laying off employees and canceling its contracts, but the National Treasury Employees Union sued to block the changes. As I said, a district judge paused reforms until Friday's reversal. The administration has hidden its desire to shrink the CFPB, which has hounded companies on all kinds of things since Elizabeth Warren devised it in 2010. And we remember who Elizabeth Warren is. That at that time, she was a professor at Harvard who pretended she was part Indian to help get the job. Well, current acting director, Russell Vought, called it a woke and weaponized agency the day after he took office, and he told most staff to stay home and stop work. Plaintiffs claimed that Mr. Vought meant to shut down the agency in violation of the Dodd-Frank law that created it. Yet Mr. Vaught's words about the CFPB and his nips and tucks don't amount to a substantial policy suitable for courts to review. In his opinion Friday, Judge Gregory Katsas reminded the plaintiffs about the limits of the Administrative Procedure Act, which lets the court review final executive actions that have direct and appreciable legal consequences on the plaintiffs. That doesn't include piecemeal changes like layoffs or an email to staff that heralds future reforms that don't impose any. The opinion, joined by Judge Naomi Rao, warned that upholding the injunction would let future lawsuits squash presidential plans long before they became policy. Quoting her, if the plaintiff's theory were viable, it would become the task of the judiciary, rather than the executive branch, to determine what resources an agency needs to perform its broad statutory functions. End quote. Well, this ruling is a setback for the unions like the NTEU, And they've challenged nearly every one of President Trump's tweaks to the federal workforce and have sought sweeping injunctions to lock in their members' jobs before the layoffs could be ordered. Their lawsuits are reminiscent of the pre-crime prophecies in the movie Minority Report, claiming to foresee how the administration will break the law before it's taken any action. Well, the Supreme Court may have the last say on how such an agency can be cut within the bounds of the law that chartered it, and the answer may be different for each agency. But President Trump chose the right agency to test this question, and the cuts are welcome. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.